So I thought I would do next my Pluto Venus video. And so for this, I have another Francis Bacon image, British painter. Oh, my mic's not on. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear the difference there. Usually have it to be close to the mic. Okay. So this is another Francis Bacon image painting. And in this particular painting, we have a very similar idea of a character sitting in a chair, uh, very warm pastel colors, except for what the character is wearing. This time, usually there's some distortion in the face. There's still some distortions, but this particular figure, this shape actually, another face is actually coming out of the head. Or to express it mythically, it's like a Janus head, not four faces, but two. And one is brownish black, visibly portraying the Jungian shadow character. And it's facing some kind of image with its side view, which just looks like a red glove, or I don't, if anyone knows what that is, feel free to write it in the images. This is not a painting I'm not that familiar with. The one that I showed in the prior Pluto moon is a painting I've known for decades and that I've really enjoyed that one for a long time. But has some similarities. I chose this one for the illustration of Pluto Venus because this is the two selves. And there's a lot of layers to that. In a Pluto Venus aspect, we're used to talking about them in reference to our relationships with others, because Venus is what one likes, what one's values are. And the need to have those values externalized in Jupiter, and also self-defined through Mars. But in the case of it representing through Venus and the journey to the underworld, we have the, I hesitate to be clear on what to use, the querent, or the person of the aspect, the holder of the aspect, is someone that, how do I put this? Their vision of love is going to be reframed in the distortion of the underworld. In other words, their sense of love and care is going to be distorted by their want or need to feel pain. In other words, a lack of separation between pain and pleasure, a kind of mixed, incested overlap between what it is to love and what it is to suffer and feel pain. And as you can imagine, this can be very disturbing when the self realizes that there's no true care in pain and suffering, or at least in the kind that's narrated as one takes their Venusian journey into the underworld. And to use this similar metaphor, I see this as, instead of being able to smell the roses externally in the world under the sun's rays, this is the rose growing upside down in the underworld. This is the celebration of black roses. And the term black rose is really interesting. There was a horror film in the 80s. It was like with all these metal bands called Black Roses. I think there's an album, either a band or an album called Black Rose. I think it's an album by, ooh, let's see if I can remember. Not remembering. I think Therion, the Swedish metal symphonic metal band, might have a song in reference to Black Rose. Anyways, the symbolism of the Black Rose to me symbolizes the journey of love into the underworld, or the confusion that love is something that belongs to the underworld. And there's associations with this in the work of Edgar Allan Poe. He lost a lot of his loves very early on to tuberculosis. He has at least three stories about um, different wives or lovers who died. And so those are very dark, kind of inverted tales, very Plutonic, Venusian. And so this is the story of the visitor, the journeyer to the nether realms, to the underworld, who doesn't realize they're in the underworld, but thinks this is where true love grows. And so in this world view, all great heights have corresponding depths, and the experiencer tends to indulge in the great heights just as much as the great depths of pain, or rather the great heights of joys and the great depths of pain. And maybe not even being able to distinguish between the two. And so these are those that are attracted to this kind of love which negates the self. So they're attracted to a type of love that is the shadow self. It is love through the shadow self. Usually this will relate to the way the child grows up. Male or female, they'll have a very strong figure for a parent, and the love will be a little warped in expression. The needs might be a little conflated and confused, and can be some parentification, just like in the Pluto moon. And the kind of love I'm talking about here is like the love of Wuthering Heights, for example. And that's a novel written by Charlotte Bronte about the experience between lovers who are so enmeshed that they can hardly tell the difference between themselves. There's no separation between one and the other. It's not healthy. It's a very unhealthy expression of love, but at the same time, it's incredibly intense and powerful and dramatic and obsessive compulsive, and expressing all the shadows of what it is to be human. And in modern psychological terms, this is, it's a form of enmeshment. It's destructive. It's highly toxic. It's layered with multiple types of projective identification and other types of projection. And it is ultimately catastrophic. And what I'm talking about mainly here are the difficult disharmonic aspects between Pluto and Venus. So I'm talking about the opposition, the square, sometimes the conjunction. The trine and the sextile would be a little lighter and easier to handle. And sometimes people have Pluto, Venus back and forth, and it could be with the parent as well, inner aspects. But what I'm talking about here is ultimately the perception, the skewed perception of love distorted through the underworld, representing a dark black rose, not the red rose of life, but the black rose of death. And so healing can come about when one is in realization of their attraction to the underworld and their patterns, and, choosing to no longer follow those old paths because they're tired of the destruction that it's left of others, of their heart, of their own heart, of their own deepest heart. In this case, it's Venus, so it's values. So one must reevaluate one's values. This is Pluto, a rebirth of one's values, and an expression of true authenticity as to what they experienced and what their responsibility was in the situation, and also learning to not just blame and shame the partner. This is something that I want to carry on as a consistent theme in my videos, especially doing interaspects and synastry aspects between people, is to is the effort to push toward a renewal and a transformation outside the victimizer cycle. And, realizing that you're a part of it just as much as the other person was. And so to be accountable to that, regardless of your role. Even the victim is in the cycle of the victimizer. And there are aspects that attract victims, and there are aspects that attract victimizers. It goes both ways, as horrific as that sounds. Society is too easy to go to one side or the other. And of course, the victimizer perspective seems utterly more horrific. And don't forget that the victimizer was a victim at one time, or they would not be a victimizer. So again, this is the cycle. This is the cycle that continues and continues. And how to stop it is to heal, is to return from the underworld with the new vision and the new understanding and the rebirth of the heart of one's values, to understand that it is necessary to honor the dark as it is to honor the light, not to over-identify with a picture of a black and darkened self because you've been soiled by trauma, but to stand in the full light of your own integrity and the veracity of who you are in recovery from the shadow side, indulging in shining in the world under the sun's rays in your own new rebirth of who you are and the love and respect for that, for the self. And again, like with the moon, Pluto aspects, there is the child, the innocent child within who once loved purely. And maybe that was only a mental dream, but, there is a such thing as compassion. And there is real things like care for others. And that means forgiveness. And that means forgiving the other, but ultimately it means forgiving the self. And so I'll leave it at that and I just want to reemphasize one point I made. And that's the accountability and the responsibility of the Plutonian, the Venusian Plutonian, to being authentic with themselves and expressing where they're at and what do they truly want. Do they prefer the underworld over the natural world? Do they think that pain is actually really love and suffering is the ultimate height of love? And that could very well be. And that's where you're at. But ultimately, there is no underworld. It is just the place where you recover your soul back and come back to the light. And the light is just the authenticity of who you are and the care for yourself. Okay, hope I wasn't too pretentious in those last statements and it was clear. Best to you all. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the chat and share with others. and like and subscribe if you'd like. Thanks so much.